We got the full review of the Canyon Spectral 2.9 CF8, and we're going to see if it's a jack of all trades or a master of none. All right, straight liners, once again, I am back for the full review of the Canyon Spectral CF8, and I am very excited to share my experience with this amazing bike. But before we get started, don't be a buster. Hit that like and subscribe button so we can bring you more reviews and awesome content. All right, so if you guys want to get caught up with some extra content and maybe a little bit more details of this bike, go to our channel and check out our unboxing video and my first ride review of this bike. So this is the CF8 model, and it sits right in the middle of the range for the Spectral 29. And I have to say that this, I think, is the sweet spot in the range. So for $5,200, you're getting an XT drivetrain, you're getting Performance Elite Fox 36 fork, and the Performance Elite rear DPX2 shock. I don't think you need any more than that. So the next level up is over $6,000. You're getting carbon rims and those type of things. I just really think that this hits a nice balance of value for what you're getting. You're getting the XM17 wheels, which I found to be amazing. I really love those wheels. For the component spec, I think it's great. The one gripe that I had with the component spec is the tires. While you get come stock with the DHF front and the DHR2 rear, both in the 3C compound, the bit of a letdown is that they do come in the XO casing. That casing is a little bit thin, I think, for most riders that are going to look for a bike like this. This bike really wants to be pushed hard, and you can take it in gnarlier terrain than you would expect. So I would like to have seen something like the XO Plus, or maybe even a double down casing in the rear. I went ahead and switched to the Specialized Eliminator grid trail in the rear and the Butcher T9 grid trail in the front. Give it a little bit more confidence in the really gnarly stuff, and if that casing is just a little bit more. But otherwise, the spec I think is amazing. Normally, I would like a longer dropper. The C-tube on this bike is a little bit taller than some of the more recent bikes we've ridden, so I only have about an inch, so I didn't find too much problem with it. The XT brakes, while they do have those fin pads, and if you saw our review on the Nuke Proof Mega 290, on that Mega, those brake pads rattled really loud and were really annoying. Luckily on this bike, I did not have that problem. Onto the climbing of this bike, my expectation was for a 150 millimeter rear suspension bike, I was gonna have to make some sacrifices as far as efficiency and nimbleness getting up the trail. I was very surprised to find for a 150 millimeter bike, this was a standout in the climbing category. I rarely ever use that lockout switch on the rear shock to climb unless it was a super steep fire road, just because that's where my mind goes. The traction on this bike, while it's not a super plush, grabby bike such as the Mega 290, it didn't have any issue getting up some of our gnarlier climbs out here on the trails. That lightweight really comes into play. That 32 pounds really helps you maneuver this bike, even with a little bit longer wheelbase. It's a 1251. While not super long, it is still a little bit longer. That weight, it was agile enough to get you up the hill. The 76-degree seat tube angle, while not on the cusp of something more progressive as some of our newer bikes with the 77 and 78, it really struck a balance of just being right in that area where not too slack and not too steep. But it felt good going up the hill. And again, with that lightweight, you're able to maneuver this bike. The head tube angle is a 64.5 degrees. So for a bike of this travel, it is on the steeper side compared to some of the new stuff, but it did translate into an easy going uphill and able to change direction really well. Now you're turning this bike downhill and you're thinking that I had such an easy time climbing this bike, I'm gonna make a lot of sacrifices going downhill. And I am here to tell you that that isn't necessarily the case. So again, touching on that geometry, the 64.5 degree head tube angle, the 76 degree seat tube angle, and the 1251 wheelbase for a size large. Those aren't numbers that tell you that this is going to be a shred sled on the downhill, but I will say that I had a great time going downhill. This bike ate pretty much every bit of chunk that I threw out of it. We have gone on several trips this last year, and this was the bike that I grabbed every time because I didn't know what we were going to get into. And I knew that this bike was able to climb well, and it was going to be able to handle a lot of chunky descents. So I've ridden a lot of FSR style 4-bar horse link rear suspensions. And I will say this is a bit of a standout because it was able to really take those big hits and absorb those small bumps really well for a 150 millimeter rear suspension bike. And again, that 64.5-degree head tube angle is kind of on, I want to say, the less progressive side, because a bike like this, you would think you're looking at something like a 64, maybe even a 63.5. I think this bike competes really well with other bikes such as the Transition Sentinel V2, and that Transition has a little bit more relaxed progressive geometry than this, and I feel like the Spectral 29 is able to keep up with some bigger bikes and really do what you need it to do on various amounts of trail, whether it be fast, bermy trails. That's where this bike really comes alive because it's poppy, you can throw it around, jump, hit those berms. It comes out of corners really nice, really quickly. It's got snappy pedaling. And then when you're going into really steep sections, that's one area where I did notice the stack on this bike. The head tube feels a little bit higher than other bikes. So jumping on the Mega back to back from this bike, you do notice that when you're going over steep sections on the Spectral, it's a little bit more work to get over the front because that higher stack wants to push you back a little bit more. But once you get used to it, you're able to adjust your riding style and then really open up the potential to this bike. And then going into the nasty, chunky, gnarly section, this bike, the suspension feels great on those areas because it's able to hit the small bumps and then take those big hits as well. We have a few drops on our trails, and this bike, while I've bottomed it out, again, no issue, no harsh bottoming out, and this bike took everything I can throw at it in stride, whether it be going to SoCal, hitting up some big mountain stuff in Fresno area, or in our home trails with some black diamonds and some nasty chunk. So while I'm making this bike sound perfect, there are a few gripes or some things that I would like to see maybe updated or changed. And I would say the first one is the headset. Now, Canyon has done something a little bit different. So the head tube where the headset goes is really large, and I feel like it's letting a lot of water in. So I noticed that the bearings in the head tube are getting a little notchy, so I will have to pull those and reach out to Canyon and see what kind of support they can give. They have been very good with any issues that I've had. I had an issue with the rear wheel being a little bit out of true, and they were quick to respond and make sure that I was taken care of well. Something else that I noticed, again, I touched on in the downhill portion of this bike, is the stack height is higher than a lot of bikes you're going to ride. So riding this bike back to back with the nuke-proof Mega 290, which I've done quite a bit, once I got on that Mega, that's where I noticed that the stack height on this bike is higher. And then going into the steep stuff and the downhill sections, you're going to have to work a little bit more to get over the front because that stack height is going to push you back a little bit more. All right, next up, you guys know what my complaints are going to be. First one is the water bottle cage. While I appreciate that there is one there, it does only fit a small water bottle. So if I'm going on a longer ride, I'm going to have to wear my pack. And if you've ridden with me or you know me, I hate wearing a pack if I don't have to. The next one will be a bash guard. While they did include an awesome chain guide, I think a bash guard is more important, especially on 150 millimeter or higher bikes. These bikes are going to be taking on really nasty, chunky stuff, and we want to protect those chain rings because they are not free and they're going to cost you a little bit of money to trade. So why not throw a little extra money at us and put them on there for the ride? Let's talk about comparisons. And of course, this bike is going to compare extremely well to the Transition Sentinel V2. While the Transition Sentinel does have more aggressive geometry, I didn't feel like that the Spectral gave up very much. Climbed very well and hit those downhills pretty hard, especially with a little bit more conservative geometry than the Sentinel V2. And the Spectral came up just a touch lighter than the Sentinel. Thank you for joining me to talk about probably one of the most versatile bikes that I have ever ridden. I would love to keep this bike, but as you know, if you watch the channel, I have to move on and sell her, and I might be one of those bikes that I do regret and will miss in the future. Again, if you guys enjoyed this content, please consider liking and subscribing so we can grow and bring you more content, more reviews on bikes and other stuff, and maybe some more ride reviews. Again, don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at straightline_MTB. And if you guys have any questions or comments about this bike, let me know below. Is this a bike that you're considering, or do you want something a little bit bigger? Again, thank you guys for joining us, and we'll check you out on the next video. All right, we got the final review of the Canon Spectral. Canon?
Boom, boom.
Cannons in the background. The popo's coming. They heard our cannons. All right.